when we are experiencing different hardships. And then we add, social stuff like racism and systemic oppression, and then other impacts like immigration, moving to a new country. This could potentially be a trauma in that person's life.
Hello, and welcome to the Connect podcast. This show is all about helping you connect to your soul's calling so you can take action on it. Because the sweetest success is a blend of discovering your purpose with the inner drive to bring it to life. I'm Sheila Botello, health coach, lifestyle entrepreneur, and mom of two, best known for my online wellness programs, mentoring, and self-love passion. Listen in for inspiring interviews, solo chats, and Q&A sessions that will move you past overwhelm towards what lights you up. Stop accepting good enough and go for your version of great in your health, business, and relationships. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to share today's interview with you for so many reasons. Dr. Lydiana Garcia is a Boricua licensed psychologist in Los Angeles, California. She's also the host of the bilingual English and Spanish podcast called The Beyond Resilience Life, where she shares information about overcoming life adversities and traumas. Dr. Garcia also helps other psychotherapists create authentic offerings, and she's a mom to two little ones who tend to keep her busy. Dr. Garcia shared the story of what took her from her home in Puerto Rico to the city to pursue her degree and later PhD in psychology, the work she's immersed herself in, and the people she's most passionate about working with. During our conversation, I learned why Lydiana is so good at what she does. Her empathy and her heart lead the way, and her skill supports transformation. As we discussed her thoughts on the stigmas associated with mental health in the past and during current times, I shared a bit about the mental health challenges that have touched my family, and she shared some valuable insights. We also talked about life raising a young family, navigating the last year, and what self-care looks like in her life. I found our conversation both refreshing and grounding. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Lydiana. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
I'm really looking forward to hearing all about your work and what you've experienced as you've grown your practice, especially in recent years, because the world has really changed so much and gone through so many emotional surges. First, I'd love for you to share where you were born and raised and where you're living now and like the journey in between.
Oh, that's a cool question. So I was born and raised in the island of Puerto Rico, and everything is so close. I was going to be like, I was born in the capital, and that's like 30, 40 minutes from where I was raised, but technically it's all like so close. But I was raised in a countryside, East Coast, and it was a private kind of a property, and it was my grandma had the first house. So as you went down the hill, there was my grandma's house, and then if you keep going down the hill, it was my house, and then if you kept going down the hill, it was my cousin and then her grandfather. And it was amazing. Like I remember like being like, I want tostones, which is fried plantains, and my grandma would be like, okay, let's go and pick it up. So she would go outside, cut it fresh from the plantain plant and bring it inside, and the taste of that, it's you cannot find it if it's not that fresh. And that's how my childhood was. It was so amazing. It was I was so blessed to have a very close-knit family. I have a younger sister. I have a lot of cousins, mostly girls, just one male cousin from my maternal side. And my grandma she was kind of like a soulmate in a way. Like she would be there and whatever I wanted. She was very close to me because I'm technically the oldest biological. And she said that she dreamt of me, that I was going to be born on August 8th and I was born on August 9th. And she said, a curly hair, dancing and energy. And I used to dance and I'm still into it. So we were really close growing up, and she would like, my other cousins, she would have food and I'm like, no, I was a little bit like picky eater, and she would satisfy my needs. And then my cousin would be like, you're so dramatic. Like your grandma's little favorite kind of mode. But I loved it. And that was until I went to college. So I grew up there my my childhood and adolescence. And then I moved to the capital to go to college. And then I moved to LA in 2008 because part of the PhD program in psychology is to complete a predoctoral internship. And you apply. It's a horrendous process. You apply to like 12 places or more. I got interviewed just in one place, and then I did not get that place. So then I had to go through this process called, in that time, clearinghouse, that it was anyone that had available opportunities one day would post it at, I think it was at 8 a.m. Pacific. So it was 11 or 12, depending on the time, I think it was 12 noon in Puerto Rico because I was East Coast. And that day, it was like my email got blasted with over 400 sites being like, I have an open. It was like kind of like a popcorn kind of mode. And then you had to like really quick start applying. And granted, they told us all you have to do is like send I want in. No, they were asking for like specific essay about them, why you want to go there. So you're like the whole day. I remember my parents and my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, just bringing me food. I was just in the computer glued, trying to apply and complete that. And one of the places, and that was for like 2-3 days on the go of keep getting rejection. As soon as you send the application, they will be like, we just accepted someone. And you're like, oh my God, I wasted 2 hours doing that essay and they already got, and I kept on going because that's part of my makeup. So I kept doing it. And then on Friday, because that was a Wednesday, I think on Friday, I got an email from a place in LA that they're like, we want to interview you. And I'm like, oh my God, kind of like the sky open and there was light. And I remember that interview that I was, because English is my second language. Now I've been in the States and for like over 10 years, but at that moment I wasn't. And when I would get nervous, I would speak so horrible English, like I would mix things. And that day I was excited, but I was grounded, which is now as I'm reflecting is something that is odd for me. And I was like English I was flowing. I was speaking in such a way that at the end I was like, wow, how did all those words came out of me? And I was so kind of like what motivators and those speakers, motivational speakers would be like, I was in the zone. And when I came back out, I was like, wow, that went really well. And long story short, I got in. And that's how we ended up in LA, which it was not a place that I applied because the image that I had about LA was that movie with Denzel Washington and The Trainer or something.
Yeah.
That it was scary. And I come from the countryside of Puerto Rico. So being in a city that felt so foreign and kind of scary for me and dangerous was like, oh, but that's where I got it. So we moved, me and my husband, and it was very interesting at the beginning. It was a challenging. It came with a lot of traffic and car tickets, like transportation tickets, because we didn't know all the different color zones and that you cannot park in the different direction that you're going. Like in Puerto Rico is a line. And, it came with a lot of learning by paying a lot of stuff. And then we kind of loved it. We loved how there was that meme that I read about Californians. One of the things that they will talk about how much they love California. And so now I'll do a little bit of that, but we loved how the sceneries, we love that you can go to the mountains because I grew up in the mountains and my husband is way more from the countryside. And so we love that because we only kind of knew classical Puerto Ricans was Florida or New York. So Florida is like flat for us. So over here we saw the mountains, we saw the ocean, we saw this kind of like the being able to go to snow if we wanted. There's the desert. It's like all these things and the rich culture and the food because we're foodies. And it was like, we love this. And also for my profession, I was getting trained in so many different models. I had all these mentors that we did move to Puerto Rico for like a year and a half after I graduated and finished and got my license. But we ended up moving back because I was at a point in my profession that I was like, I am seeking more guidance. I am seeking more mentorship, more training. And over there, people were seeking that from me. And I'm like, I am like a year into
Right.
this. I don't feel ready. So we moved back. And then our kids were born here. And now we're like, what do we do, with everything? But so far we're here, we're loving it, and still open to other ideas down the road, especially as you grow a family in a city. But
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Oh, I love this story. And I love that you were pleasantly surprised because it's true. We can see the world through different lenses that aren't our own very often. And it does impact our experience in new places. So I'm so glad that you fell in love with where you ended up.
Yeah.
And so now you have how many kids?
Two.
And how old are they?
So Tiago, he is 5.5, and I have 9. Well, she's gonna be 9 months in 2 days. Baby
Oh,
girl, Luna. So yeah. So I'm in the midst of she's a pandemic baby because she was born in May, right when we were still like trying to understand this virus and all that. So
right. Oh,
and in the
and
midst
I
of
love her name. Oh my goodness.
oh,
So good.
yeah. Yeah. And in the midst of figuring out first year of real school for my kid, and then it turned out to be distance learning. So a lot of pruning and shedding things that are not sustainable or helping us as a family.
Oh, yes. So good. I would love to hear also, and I'm picturing you growing up in this beautiful country island life and with all of your family around you and like you say, a lot of women, which that's very interesting. That must have had a specific impact on you, a really powerful impact on you about what women are capable of and the strength of supporting each other as women. You were raised in that. And so I wonder when you were a younger, was there any experience that you saw that you can remember that would have pointed to your current career in psychology? Like, were you the go-to person when people were having problems? I'd love
Yes,
to hear.
yes. Yeah, yeah. And thank you for that reflection. I haven't put it that way, that in a way I kind of um, was somewhat in a matriarchal kind of experience. Yeah, no, when I said I have a lot of cousins, I always forget the count right now, but I think we're like 10 girls and
Wow.
one boy. And I was raised by, and I spent a lot of time with at least 3 of them that we were kind of the same age growing up with my sister as well. So I was since I was little, I had this curiosity about why would people do stuff. There was that show, Jerry Springer. This is like 90s, right? I think he still has the show, but yeah, but there was that show, Jerry Springer, and there was other ones like that that would be like kind of like come the father of the child or whatever kind of thing, the drama.
Yeah.
And I and I love the ones about the adolescents that were like rebellious and I'm leaving your home. And I always like love listening to those and seeing how the adolescents were very different and how the parents were trying to figure out. And a lot of it had to do with some issues in the family unit. And there was also the movie. I think a lot in that's another interesting thing why I ended up in LA, because the way I like to think about it a lot is about how movies shape and help me understand things. I think it's something about something dangerous in the fall, night in the fall, but it's a movie in where a child ends up being like he develops he stopped talking basically, and the parents died in the room. So they're trying to figure out, and I'm not going to share what happened in case nobody has seen that movie, but it was that whole thing of me trying to understand why that kid stopped talking altogether. He was like 9 or 10 or something like that. And what happened with his sister? Like she's very controlling of him. And then there was a psychologist or a therapist involved trying to figure out. So that was me. I was always the one trying to figure out why would people make this? And then also my friends and at school, as I been reflecting about how I ended up in this profession, I remember when I was in 10th grade, unfortunately, I mean, she's fine, but one of my peers, she disclosed to the teacher, it was biology class, she disclosed to the biology teacher that she ingested many different pills. And I don't know why they asked me to go with her while she waited for her mom to come.
Mm.
So that was interesting. I mean, I know I was friends with her, but I was not her best friend. So I remember sitting with her kind of as she was like, oh my God, my mom is going to cry. My mom is going to be. So I was providing her that support. I was also the one that some of my cousins will come to. And even if they started crying, my aunts will call me like, walk, can you please come? She's crying. And in 8th grade, I was in a book report in an English class. They, book reports, assignments. I chose one of my aunts. She was raised in Chicago, so she had a lot of English books. And I chose one, and it was about a girl that developed anorexia, so the eating disorder. And the book was all from the first perspective, her life. And as I was reading, and I'm like, this is because she's the middle daughter. This is because the mom. So I was already making all these interpretations. And almost at the end of the book, then she starts going to therapy, and the therapist starts saying all that. And I'm like, oh my God, like I'm kind of good at it. Like I'm getting this. So I knew from since 8th grade that I wanted to study. In that moment, I thought it was psychoanalyst because that's what I was like. There was no Google, right? I don't even know how
Right.
I searched it, but it was like maybe to be a psychoanalyst. But then it was like, no, just study psychology and. But a super long journey. But yes, I knew from the get-go that, and my grandma, both of my grandmas were teachers, and my maternal grandmother, that's the one that I was the closest to. I felt, and I would tell her that later on, she was like a natural school psychologist. She was
Mm.
that she even taught me math in 4th grade, but she was that kind of teacher that she would help other kids to learn different things, skills that they were having difficulties, even reading, writing. And she would come with all these games. She even taught us math in a way that it was fun, using the fingers and using tricks. So and she continued to do that until she almost, after even she retired, she would just go back to the school, and they would give her, this kid is having an issue with here. So she would figure out, and I'm like, grandma, you are like basically like a school psychologist. So
Wow. So obviously it was being modeled for you from a young age. And then also there's just something in you that people saw, that perhaps that empathy, that gentleness, that the questions, the listening ear that people just become aware of. And often we don't see in ourselves, particularly when we're younger, we don't see the things maybe that we're good at. We often, at least in my experience, but a lot of peers growing up too, we look at the things we're not good at. And I don't know why that is, but you probably do. There's probably a reason, but I think it's so wonderful when someone sees that in you and it's just like innate. And then you knew this was what you wanted to do, because that gives you fuel to be able to take that long journey of all of those years of school, of transitioning into completely different home, a completely different city to start brand new. So you are a licensed psychologist. What is your current specialty?
Yeah. So kind of like it all stems out of one main one, which is working with helping people process and overcome traumas and life adversities. That's kind of like the overall main one. And then within that, I have this subspecialty of working with women that have been touched by sexual abuse, rape, being sexually molested, and childhood abuse. And and then I also remember I told you about the Jerry Springer show. I
Yeah.
love working with teens. I love working with those kind of teens that are kind of like very out there and expressive. And that's it, I'm done. And I haven't been doing that in my prior practice necessarily, but when I was working in community mental health agencies and in a hospital, that's what I was like, send me all the teens and their parents. Love working with them. And then I also do psychological evaluations for immigration purposes.
Mm. I'm sure so many parents and these teens, especially looking back now, can say, whoa, what a gift. I just love that you went into your work with that passion. My father actually struggled with mental health since he was 18. And when I was very young, he was able to get a handle on it a little bit in his 30s after taking a mental leave for a while. So I remember being very young and him being basically in bed. At the time, I don't even know what his diagnosis was. It wasn't really until later he'd gotten things together. There was always this kind of underlying dissatisfaction with how he was feeling, no matter how good life was. So I had a really, that was an interesting start for me into my life. But then I had a very close relationship with my father from my young life and with both my parents and a great home life, lived in the country as well on a dirt road with cows in the backyard, not my cows, but the farmer behind us. So there was a beauty in that. And I think he threw himself into fatherhood. And then when we all left home, I noticed there was a shift. Like, again, that dissatisfaction reared its head again. And he started to make more erratic decisions, et cetera. And basically, long story short, he was diagnosed as bipolar. Then our relationship got really, really difficult. One thing that stands out to me, though, is that as he was going to a psychologist and I was able to be tapping in with her, like just to check in from afar, it was so difficult having that disconnect. And of course, there's client patient privilege too, right? So, and I'm the
Yes.
daughter. It was challenging, but it really created a lot of stress in his life because he wanted to kind of take back control. And I think a lot of it was because of the stigma of mental health. And he was born in 1938. So the thoughts of getting help, or it's okay that you need someone to talk you through this, like we all have things, this is just one of them. That was really, really difficult. And I think it ultimately led to him not getting sufficient help later on. He's since passed, and our relationship did not end in the best way. But I do hold on to the relationship we had in my early life. And I know that it was just he had those struggles. So I would love for you to please speak about this stigma of mental health and what you would love more people to know about it, and also how things have changed or are changing.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that story, and I bet a lot of people are relating to it. Um,
Mhm.
and how I will start answering this question is the stigma is still there. And it's so unfortunate that we normalize going, for the most part, going on a yearly basis to do a checkup, a physical checkup. And if we cut ourselves, we're like, okay, we need a band-aid. We know what to do, right? It's just, like basic stuff. And for the most part, most people have basic first aid kit in their homes. However, we don't talk about our mental health. We don't talk about our emotions. We don't talk about how they impact our lives. And what we do is we push them away. So, how I like to kind of conceptualize this, and how I hope you can, for your listeners to hear this, is I am very much into understanding what happened even before intergenerational. When you said your dad was born in 1938, that was the time around the after World War I, the Depression and all that. And then there was World War II. It was a very difficult time.
It's
And
interesting you say that because his father trained Army officers and he was gone much of the time. And his mother also had, looking back, it's so obvious she had some mental health issues herself and needing to raise her two boys. So, yes, all of that
yeah,
totally plays into it. But then also the whole, hey, I want to make my dad proud. He's never here. But when he is here, he had some substance abuse issues. So, not getting that love from his dad, it's like a double edged sword. It helped him be the opposite of his father. So, he was a really, really good dad in my childhood years. But even till his later years, some of the things he would say, I realized he probably was still carrying with him that he didn't really get the love he needed and the
yes.
understanding.
Yes. And that's a perfect segue to kind of like not only what happened to you, but also like knowing that there's this normal human needs that we kind of think we're not. We kind of projected because we're this strong, especially for men. All
Mm-hmm.
the, patriarchy also impacts them, and all these expectations that they have for them being the breadwinner, or being the kind of like the head of the home, or all these different things. And all those things will kind of create this imbalance in, I'm feeling this, but I have to push it away. And then my mom went to that, and now I'm at this age too. So I am reflecting about my life. Did I do what I wanted? And what do I want? But what about my kids? And it's kind of like in that sense of a caregiver, that you're like, what about me? Kind of like I keep giving, giving, giving. What about me?
Mm-hmm.
So something is gonna explode. Something
Right.
is gonna show up. And it makes completely sense. Bipolar, there is a genetic component, but at the end, all the DSM, which is what we call our Bible, like, kind of like where we diagnose, and is based on the American Psychiatry Association. It's a huge book. All of it, if you look at it, a lot of it has to be filled with what happened to us genetically and all these experiences. So I want to normalize as much as possible what mental health is, just kind of in that sense, like physical health. If you don't attend to something, something is going to happen. If you don't eat healthy or exercise, then you can, I know it's not for everyone, but you can gain weight, you can develop some issues with your health, you can have issues with your metabolism, with sleep, and the same happens with our emotions. When we are experiencing different hardships, and then we add, social stuff like racism
Oh,
and
yeah.
systemic oppression, and then other impacts like immigration, moving to a new country. There's so many physical stuff. Even right now, I'm thinking of everyone that's being impacted by this snowstorm and did not have the resources because the state was not prepared. This could potentially be another of the trauma in that person's life.
Mm-hmm.
So the stigma is still there, and we're moving a little bit away, and just as much as I can normalize that is just part of being. Like, even today in the morning, I was like, I am getting off one extra thing. Like, I just announced on my Instagram that I am not gonna be fighting the algorithm. I'm done with it. I've been like trying to figure things, and it's not longer sustainable for me. It's provoking more anxiety for me to be like, what am I going to do this week? What am I going to do this week kind of mode? Because I haven't been able to sit down and even do the monthly whatever thing. And I'm like, no, that's producing something that is not helpful. And if I keep pushing myself for that, then it's going to accumulate with the distance learning, with no sleep when my baby's teething right now, 2 teeth, and other things, So I hope this message gets that it's one of the most normal things, just like normal waking up and going to the bathroom and all that. And the other part about the stigma, it also depends, of course, about the family and how we talk about it. And it's very interesting whenever I ask someone, like when I do immigrations evaluations, and I ask them, so is there any family history of mental health? Everybody says no, because it's something that you don't even conceptualize. However, if I ask, is there any issue with high blood pressure, diabetes? They're like, oh, this one, this one, this one. But most likely there was, especially if you're living in hardship or you experience things. So kind of like knowing that it's not like, and I know diagnosis can have that impact, especially bipolar can have such a negative connotation.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, if you really look about how I conceptualize trauma and how many psychologists and theories conceptualize trauma, that high and that low, it's just our way of our nervous system responding. Like the high is kind of like that fight and flight mode, and that low is kind of like that more of shutdown mode, kind of more depression. And we all go through those stages in our life depending on how our nervous system manages it and how we learn to manage it. Some people stay more in that high zone, kind of like that irritability, anger, and let's hustle, 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 hustle. But if you stay there for a long time, your body, something's going to happen. You're going to develop a cold, or, get sick or something, and something's going to push you down to that rest kind of mode.
Yeah,
And
like that. Is that when your serotonin levels are like too high for too long?
um,
When
I
you're
wouldn't
up
know
there?
necessarily about the serotonin, but it's kind of more about when it's if you how I describe it, let me try to put it. I know we're not visual because I like to do visual. So if you put kind of imagine like kind of like in the middle, there's this bar, and
Mhm.
then we have something above it and something below that bar. So in the middle will represents when we're okay, when we're in a mode that our bodies is like in a rest and digestion mode, when
Yeah.
you feel your feet in the ground, when you things happen and you feel like you don't explode, you can enjoy life. And a lot of us might even feel like, what is that? That's foreign right now. But hopefully it's not, you can remember instances. And then when something happens in your life or things start to get, accumulated and your basic needs are not being met, and then other needs are not being met, then, or something happens, then a lot of people just go straight to the up, which is that first response, which is mobilized response of fight or flight,
Mhm.
because our nervous system interprets there's danger. So let's protect ourselves by either fighting this or running away from it. So that's why we call it the mobilized response. And then if our nervous system, not our minds, not our mindset and power, none of that, interprets that the danger is imminent and you don't have any way of fighting or running away from it, then we go into an immobilized response. That's the last response that we use as a way to kind of survive. It's kind of like playing dead, like an
Mhm.
animal would do, to kind of like restore and hopefully survive this. And that's kind of what we call the low zone, if that in that bar, like that's the below. Depression is usually like a real or a clinical depression that you're at least 2 weeks in that mode of just being in your bed, not taking a shower, not wanting to do anything, not or eating more, eating less, difficulties with sleep or sleeping more, just not wanting to talk to no one, feeling horrible. If you
Mhm.
stay like that in 2 weeks, you're kind of like you could be in that mode of just frozen,
Mhm.
like
That sounds
immobilized.
so familiar to me. And it's amazing what you get used to and what you see as this
Yeah.
is normal, like what we grow up with. It's just like people in various other types of home settings where maybe there was a lot of arguments and a lot of physical fighting and really unhealthy relational communication or non communication, right? That just wasn't working, but it felt normal to people until they got themselves into another context and said, whoa, this is really what it looks like. And this is what life can look like. Yeah. Like just yeah, that shift from like, okay, we're going to conquer the world to I can't get out of bed
And we all
days at a
go
time.
through it. And
Yeah.
we
But
all go
there's
through
a
it.
spectrum, isn't there? There
Yes.
truly is. And how I'm really curious to know for this past year, with it being filled with so many emotions and with you working on immigration as well, the
Mm.
added emotions that are attached to that, all of the struggle and the back and forth, what has this past year been like for you? Do you feel like there has been a marked, heightened mental health struggle for many people?
It's such an interesting year
Mm,
because it started, and when the pandemic hit, I knew already that I was approaching a season in my life that was again of doing less. Um, Forcefully in a way, and in a way because I'm fortunate enough and privileged enough that my husband can be the breadwinner at this moment and I can take a little step back. And I also wanted to breastfeed Luna because I did with my son. So I knew I was, as 2020 started, even before the pandemic, I knew I was approaching a lower season in my life of reducing task and lowering, not being that hustler necessarily.
mhm,
And then when the pandemic hit, then it was like, oh my goodness, this is even, yeah, I had to let go. So this 2020 was the year of first, my usual reaction to changes is kind of like I fight it. I go for like 1 or 2 days that I'm anger, like, I want to keep holding onto this. I want to keep holding into this kind of mode. And I might be overly expressive about it. And that's just how I process it. And then
mhm,
I accept it. But
mhm,
I'm not the type of person that I accept things right away. That's not
mhm,
me. So that happened. And there was that process. And I let go of my office that I loved. because we were not going to be seeing people in person, and that was an expense. I let go of the office. I let go of the expectations. I was planning 2020. I had all these big goals and all these things. So kept, removing and pruning and taking out things. And then when distance learning happened, it was like the cherry on the top. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to keep letting go more and more and more and more stuff. So that was 2020 in a way. And then I did had more people trying to get a hold of my services, but I couldn't because I still have very limited childcare because I do want to also be there for my daughter since I was for my son.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot of boundaries and creating the support that I need, even though it's very limited in terms of having anyone else to help. But there is a market. People are, at least in my practice, I actually saw an increase in asking for services. And I left some of the places that I would market myself, and still people are finding me. I'm in that really cool age in the profession that people find me by referrals or something. So I don't have to like market myself that much, which is very nice. But I also saw my colleagues getting more people trying to seek therapy. That's one thing. And then 2020 started, and I was already like, okay, I already took so much out. Maybe the kids will go back by February to school. Now I laugh because I keep having this. That's one of the things that I'm still fighting here and there, the whole distance learning. And I'm still pruning, and I keep pruning. So there's that part of knowing that there was the need, but knowing also what are my needs, what is my family needs, and seeing my son kind of mental health declining, and being able to talk to the teacher about his struggles, because he's very social and he had a lot of changes in 2020. He not only he had to suddenly get out of preschool and not even say goodbye to his friends. And when I say very social, I'm like extremely social kid. Like right now, he's like, I'm hearing him upstairs. He's probably like, he's always like participating and raising his hand and all that in classroom. And then there was a new baby. And even though he loves his baby sister, he's struggling with it. Even last night, he was like, I was with him in the floor, and he's a very touchy. His love language is physical touch. And I was holding him, and then my baby started crawling my way, and he's like, no. And I'm like, oh my God, we're like 9 months into it and still like having a lot, like, why can you be with me? Why so he's still struggling with that big time. And the other thing is we also moved to a place that we love now. There's even neighbors that he can play here and there.
Right.
But a lot of other friends with kids his age moved out of California as well. So there was so many losses in 2020 that he's still struggling with that. So like I'm reevaluating to see if I just take like independent study with him. It's just I'm like, okay, what else do I need to change in my schedule to now be the one doing that part too? So like I'm reevaluating. That's this year, I guess the theme has been reevaluating and changes and new things to kind of sustain me, sustain them, sustain the family, and also evaluating what else do we need to keep changing. Even if we said yes to something, we might down the road be like, okay, that's no longer serving. So
that answers the question that I was going to ask you of what is something people can do who are really feeling in it right now to lessen some of that stress. And I think you said it really well. Reevaluating, continually reevaluating, and then getting rid of the extra bits that aren't working for you. And your son is at the age, like he's very young still, where if it worked for your career and if it worked for your heart as a family, if you chose, this is what we need to do right now. Independent study with your son, it could be so much fun. I've home educated my kids since they were 3.5. It can initiate and encourage more of a strong bond with the siblings too, because that connection of learning, which at that age too, learning is so play-based. It's so interactive. It takes on so many different forms. And that can really be a blessing that can then strengthen both him and your daughter as they move forward into whatever area of, learning that you want to go, or once he does reintegrate back into school. And it would just feel, as a mother, it would fill your heart up so much, because I can tell based on what you're saying, there is that push pull for you. You're feeling more
Yes.
pulled towards the home right now. And of course, I mean, you're breastfeeding still. You have a 9-month-old baby. Like, yeah, you're meant to be in that phase right now. Your body and your heart and everything is telling you that. So I love that you're
Mm.
allowing everything to emerge, and you're not looking outside of yourself and saying, okay, no, but I'm supposed to do this, this, and this, and I need to check these boxes. Because I think people after this year really understand it's not about the box checking. We know if we really stop and have to ask ourselves how we feel about something, we really, really know. And so we need to start trusting ourselves. And what I would love to see more of, and I think you and I where the community that we met in is in a very
Mhm.
beautiful, supportive connection with each other as to, hey, we may do things differently, but we're going to support each other in the decision that we make, knowing that you know what's best for you and your family. So I
Yeah.
just want to say I support you in whatever you choose,
Hmm.
and I'm here to be a sounding board from the
Oh,
mothering stuff anytime. So
thank
I
you.
love that you shared that.
And one thing that I would add to that is also recognizing the grief that might come, because
Yes.
I wanted to do. I do feel, I mean, right now I'm, again, remember how I mentioned that my initial phase is fighting things.
Yes.
Like I did had all these goals and idea right when I got pregnant the second time. I was in a ball. I was in a snowball effect, and I was like, whoa, I'm getting all this impact. I was already working. My son was in preschool full time, and I was doing the private practice part time, and I was developing the online business, and I'm like, I'm loving this. And then I feel like being forced in a way to pause more and keep pruning
Yeah.
has been hard.
Yeah.
And now I'm feeling more that I can accept it. But for any other caregiver or mom that is listening, just know that, there is that part of like, okay, that's great that I'm doing this, but I also wanted to do that, especially knowing that I have all this knowledge about resiliency and working with trauma, and feeling like I can't be so much present and be there has been a challenge. And at the same time, I'm like remembering that I'm applying that and I'm modeling it,
Yes.
not only for my kiddos, but also for anybody that is seeing. Like I'm modeling how I'm applying that to me first, because I need everything that I've been saying out there and just putting out there. I need it for me right now. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, it's great that you are taking that in yourself. And I do find the same thing. I think we often teach what we most either needed at one point in our life or what we currently need. And that's always coming up for me in anything that I'm sharing or coaching on. It's things that I'm working through or have worked through and had success with, or I'm stumbling through, but having that transparency of, hey, we're trying to figure this out. Nobody has it all figured out. Nobody's going to ever do it perfect. And thank God, because perfect is boring. You're
Yes.
gonna learn so much more. Like I really think on a global scale, how hard this year has been for people and emotional, and just the sense of loss and uncertainty that so many people have. There have also been on the flip side tremendous gifts. People really learning who they are and what they're made of. And we get to go back on this, and we will become stronger through the struggle. And it's unfortunate that often we have to struggle to get stronger, but it is like I heard someone saying it's like going to the gym, and when you could go to gyms and lifting weights, you're
Mhm.
going through that pain in order to build something stronger. And at the same time, I do love this concept of pruning that you were talking about, and how we need to have that grace on ourselves to be able to let go of as many things as we need
Yes.
to, so we can have the energy, so we can have the grace on ourselves and have the space and time. Because when we don't do that, that's when stress and overwhelm seems to really take over. I would love to know
Mm.
on that note,
Mhm.
What are some of the wellness and self-care practices that are really filling you up right now? Some practical stuff you're doing. What's your jam?
Yeah. Right now is little doses of like sometimes I just put my AirPods and put music if I the one that needed the most. And I have this playlist that I did for my birth that is like empowered, like with Beyonce and all sorts about, who runs the world kind of songs. And sometimes I need that. And sometimes I need songs that remind me of my youth and partying and dancing in Puerto Rico in my early 20s and enjoying that and just singing. I bought even a Bluetooth for my shower and something like singing, even though
Nice.
I'm not a singer. I don't, I mean, I'm not a professional singer, but I singing in, it even helps because it kind of like that clears that chakra, and you're just like that energy that is stuck there for people like me that hold things back. So I like, whoa, or sing in the car if I'm by myself. So those are simple things. And then I also have like near me, essential oils that sometimes
Hmm.
I snuffle on in or put them in my skin. I have a huge mason jar with always with water. Right now I have, you see that color because it has liposomal vitamin C
Nice.
and it had lemon before. So like I'm taking care of my basic needs. I also go to bed. I love meditating, but I haven't been able to do, and I'm like, okay with that. I'm like,
Mhm.
I go to bed and I wake up like around almost 8 a.m. I mean, I do wake up at least once at night to breastfeed, but I'm doing it laying in bed. I'm like simplifying
Mm.
in things. My husband
Yeah.
brings her. I'm one side laying in bed with my eye mask, closed eyes, and then the other side, and then I bring her back. So I'm like simplifying. Also with the foods, trying to eat a lot of ground kind of vegetables for me, like sweet potatoes, yams,
Hmm.
warm food to
Yeah.
help. So those are like basic need stuff. In terms of other kind of simple things, I have a weighted lap. Um, it has, I don't know if it has pellets or rice,
Oh,
but I
nice.
put this when I do my sessions. I like to get comfortable clothing. I like to do grounding. I'm exercising too. I'm either doing yoga or I have a Peloton bike or I join a dancing moms program once a week. So
Nice.
little things and having fun. Having fun for me
Mm.
is key. And but things that I can integrate here and there because I'm with the kids or I'm here, I'm working. So I'm always trying to find. And I think that's really important. It's like finding and also be at your senses and finding things that you can have access to instead of being like, okay, I'll meditate tomorrow at 5 a.m. and that's my only resource to. No, it's like, what can you do in the meantime? Smell is so important. That's why the essential oils or just having scents that you enjoy, things that you can touch, things that you can feel, see, hear. Also going outside sometimes and just watching little
Hmm.
birds and the sun and just closing your eyes and feeling the sun so in your skin. But in general, like those basic things.
Oh, that is so good. And now you just make me want to crank some tunes, some J-Lo, I think, this
Yes.
afternoon. Oh, yeah. Like, wasn't that empowering, the Super
Oh
Bowl
my God.
experience with
Oh,
Shakira and
yes.
J-Lo? Oh my goodness. And then
Yes.
everything changed, right? We felt like we can do anything. And then
Yeah.
what?
And boom.
It
And
felt like
then,
wah
yeah,
wah.
I
And
know. I know.
yet, what's been really beautiful is to then see people like J-Lo, Shakira, other people like banding
Hmm.
together to really be a light and to use their gifts and talents to elevate and to inspire and bring hope and compassion. I do love, yes, singing. Yeah, for sure. There's music, there's got to be music on. It's actually strange because
Yes.
when I'm recording a podcast, obviously I'm not going to have music on and it's the quietest my space ever is. But our conversation is the music. I did see, I think, a reel that you did recently where you were dancing. And I thought, oh, yeah, it's like
Yes.
embodying ourselves. Like it really is a feminine action. And I think the masculine patriarchal kind of model has us disconnect from that and just
Yes.
only think about what is in our mind, focus on the to-do list and structure. But very often, especially when we need to elevate how we're feeling and deal with difficult times, we need to feel into what we need. And that could be, yeah, a dance, a song,
Mhm.
something nourishing to eat. And I agree, sleep is such a simple, accessible way. Well, maybe it's not as simple as it used to be because we have so many distractions. But like you said, of telling Instagram, listen, you're not controlling me anymore. That's so powerful. Like I love to use Instagram as a way to connect and stuff, but I have very strict boundaries about how I use it and when I use it. I love that you are taking good care of yourself and you're modeling for your family and the people around you and all of us what we can do for ourselves. And you're doing this with two small kids, one distance learning, running a home, running a practice, and yet you're still doing it. So you show us that it's possible. So thank you for that. And I know your matriarchal, your ancestors and the people you grew up with would be so incredibly proud and honored to see you doing that. So thank you for modeling that for us.
Thank you. I receive it. Yeah.
Well, Lydiana, I so appreciate you making the time to be here and for sharing so much helpful insight for us. I think we got a little deeper than I had thought we could get, and I'm really grateful for that. I actually see a time I'd love to have you back on because I feel like there's so many other things we could talk about, and you have such a depth of knowledge and experience. So I think it can benefit so many people. Where can people find and follow you, and what are you most excited about as you move forward in your practice?
Yeah. This is such timing because I did that post earlier today. So, I mean, I am in Instagram. I'm just not going to be necessarily showing up how I used to. Yeah. But I am in Instagram at dr.Lydiana Garcia. And Lydiana is with Lydiana. And then I also have a podcast called the Beyond Resilience Life, and it's a bilingual podcast, English and Spanish. Today, an episode I have to check. I don't know if the editor sends it back because it's super long, but a very special episode. It's coming today. That it's really about healing the post-traumatic slave syndrome and how I've done that with my ancestors and all that. And I would say the best way to honestly know where and get my information, or even get even more information, because I'm stopping sharing that much in Instagram, it's via my newsletter. I'm doing a monthly newsletter, and in January it was all about chronic stress and managing triggers and all that. February was about self-love. March is going to be about empowering, and I'm going to talk a little bit about shedding off and, and balancing and reevaluating because it's about the Women Empowerment Month. So yes, so that would be the best place to find me.
We'll make sure we link everything in the show notes for you. Absolutely. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We would love to know what part of our conversation resonated the most for you. Please let us know by tagging this episode on Instagram at Sheila Botello and at dr.Lydiana Garcia. We would so appreciate it. See you next time. Thank you so much for being here with me on the Connect podcast. If you like this episode, please share it with someone you think would enjoy it. Also, if you head over to iTunes to leave a review, I'd be so grateful. Let us know what your favorite parts were and what you'd like to hear more of. It will help us have a greater impact, elevating many more people to grow and succeed together. See you next time.